Well, it is a moment of surprise, and in moments of surprise and unexpectedness, things can happen. I want to bring in Father Robert Hagan. He has known Pope Leo XIV for more than 25 years. So, Father Rob, can you believe this is real?
We are shocked. We're very excited. It's almost leaves you speechless. We're very, very, very happy for the Augustinians, and for the world and for the church. He's an exceptional man. He's a good human being. And I think the world is going to see a real instrument of God's grace and love. We're very blessed.
Father Rob, he talked about a missionary church. He talked about building bridges. He clearly had prepared, or he took the time. We waited over an hour, so it was longer than we had anticipated. And maybe it was because he was writing what he chose to say to the crowd. Having known him for a quarter century as you do, what did you hear as you heard him address the tens of thousands here?
I heard his lived experience. That wasn't just a speech. That's who he is. It's the life he lives. He is a bridge builder. He is a person of hope. He's incredibly bright, but he doesn't condescend. He uses his gifts in a way that lifts people up. And he's been doing it really throughout the course of his whole life, in his life as an Augustinian, his life as a missionary and a priest. And certainly he will bring those gifts now as our Holy Father, the Pope.
And knowing him as you do, what do you think his response was when he realized, at whatever point he realized in the past day and a half, that it was going to be him, that he was going to be the next Pope?
You know, as Catholics, as Christians around the world, we understand that this is really guided by the Holy Spirit. And so you really don't know. Just like Pope Francis at the time. I mean, there's a lot of things that you read, and a lot of people like to handicap these things. But until it actually happens and the Spirit moves in the direction that God wants us to move in, you really don't know. And so I think there was a lot of prayer, a lot of reflection, a lot of speculation. And I don't think that Pope Leo had any designs on the office. That you truly want what it is God's will to be. And so the Spirit has spoken, and I think it's very humbling for all of us. And I can only imagine how he feels that the Spirit has designated him with this office and responsibility and opportunity to really be the instrument of peace and healing and hope that our world needs at this time.
And what does it say, Father, to you, that in a world where there has never been an American Pope, in part because of America's dominance in the world, there were reasons that there had not been, and that at this moment, when America's relationship with the world is so fraught and so fragile, that the 133 cardinals in that room would choose him, would at this moment choose an American?
As an American, I'm very humbled. I'm very proud. We are a loving people. I think that we all have our faults and our challenges and our growing edges. But Pope Leo represents all that is good about being an American. That to want to work for the freedom and the justice and the opportunity for all people, the core values upon which this country was founded, to leave some of the other things behind and really be an instrument, a promoter of all things good for the common good, for people on the margins, for the poor. These are the values that Pope Leo has lived. As you know, he has served as a missionary. He served as a leader. He served as an administrator, as a counselor, as a teacher. He's worn many hats. And so I think this is a culmination of gifts and experience that now the world will be proud of, and certainly Americans, I think, um, can hold up as what we all aspire to be the loving peacemakers, the promoters of freedom and justice that we're all called to be. And so hopefully that will inspire people to do it in their where they find themselves in their particular walks of life.
Father Rob, I appreciate your time and thank you so much. Thank you for sharing some of your friend, 25 years of friendship, and now seeing him on a stage and in a moment that is truly hard to comprehend, this incredible moment. Thank you so much. So it does start to sink in, and I guess it's, you know, you see people here, just something good, something wonderful, a new pope. Whoever it was, this crowd would have been full of joy, right? When they said, "I am so happy." That was before they knew who it was.
Yes.
But then we find out also that we are a part of a moment in history. All of us collectively around the world watching this, and certainly here you feel it.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's a moment of incredible joy, excitement, surprise. And I think the fact that it is an American Pope, the first American Pope, adds to what is an extraordinary moment. Because I think there would have been a little bit of disappointment or deflation if we had seen a Pope from Europe or from Italy on the balcony. Because the papacy has already moved beyond Italy with Pope Francis, who was the first Latin American Pope. Now we're seeing that continuing. The fact that the Church is more than Europe and it is going beyond that, I think that is so significant. I think that's also part of why this is such an historic and special moment.
You know, I think that's such an interesting point. With Pope Francis, we had somebody who was a Latin American but of strong Italian heritage and had that connection. Now we have a Latin American who's actually a North American from the United States. And this mixed identity, the way it really represents the Church's universal reach and universal mission, is really beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. Father Mark Lewis joins us now. Father, also, I know you have known the Pope, Pope Leo XIV, for a long time. Did you ever imagine that your friend, Robert Provost, now Pope Leo XIV, would be in this moment?
Actually, no, I haven't. I've never met him.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was misinformed.
Okay.
So, all right. What do you think of an American becoming Pope in this moment? Is that something that you ever expected to see?
No. I was pretty clear that I didn't think I would ever see a U.S. Pope. So the complete surprise for me. As a Jesuit, I have a sort of sense of happiness of passing the papacy from the Society of Jesus to the Augustinians. I think a very fine order. I think we'll be very blessed by this Pope. Other things I can add, you know, I think the generosity of the U.S. is strong. Mm-hmm. No, I think the generosity of the Church in the U.S. is represented in sending people to the missions, and this is a very clear example of someone who is from the U.S. but is also very much a Latin American, and has also given great service to the Church in Rome.
What message do you think the cardinals were sending with this decision? And I know it's a complicated question, and there are many different answers to it, but we are in the midst of a historic moment with the United States choosing to sever so many of its relationships and challenge them around the world. That for these cardinals, the most diverse group from the most number of countries in the world, to now, at this moment, for the first time, pick an American, that is this moment in history, too. You really cannot separate the moment that we are in from the history being made.
Correct. I think several cardinals that I heard speak talked about putting aside the question of nationality. Some of it came up in the sense of whether we would have another Italian pope or whether somebody could be a pope from this place or that. I think it seems to me that the message of the cardinals is that nationality is not a concern. It's the quality of the person. And I think even more so in the case of someone who has been serving the church in so many different places, this is clearly someone whose personality is recognized much more than his nationality or the languages he speaks even.
All right. Well, Father, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time and being with us in this historic moment. And Father Beck, let me come back to you. I know you, as you think about the positions of Pope Leo XIV, and when he talks about a missionary church, he talks about building bridges, he talks about Pope Francis. Sorry, I'm just turning as you're seeing some celebrating in the crowd here. What do we know, Father Beck? What do we know about where he stands on some of the most crucial issues that the cardinals had to make a decision? Did they want to continue to move forward, to progress as a church, or did they want to go a more traditional route?
Well, there are a couple things that I note. I think he is a bridge builder, as he said. As you'll note, the garments, we talked about, well, what will he wear when he comes out? And it was a little more traditional than Pope Francis wore, which will please some to say this bridge between those who have been kind of more liberal, more progressive, more conservative, that this man is somewhat in the middle. He spoke about the synodal church, though, so the coming together of various opinions. And so we know he's in that mold. I was very struck by the fact that he thanked his old diocese in Peru. He said to that they shared their faith with me, that he learned from the people he worked with. So we know all of that. I was struck that on some issues, because he's American, that some issues that have been important to the American Catholic Church, in particular the LGBTQ issue, will be interesting to see, because I looked at a quote in 2012 that he gave that the New York Times said, and he lamented the sympathy, I'm quoting, for beliefs and practices at odds with the gospel, like homosexual lifestyle and alternative families comprised of same-sex partners and their adopted children. Now, that was a year before Pope Francis was elected that he said that. So now he's gone through this whole process. He became head of the dicastery that picks bishops throughout the world. So a lot of them know him because he helped pick them with Pope Francis. So has he evolved even in some of these positions as a bridge builder? Would he say the same thing about LGBTQ issues that he said in 2012? Or like Pope Francis, has he somewhat evolved to say, how do we now reach out in a way that's going to be even more inclusive? I think all of those things will be interesting to see as we see this Pope evolve and develop.
Yes. All right. And Father Beck, of course, staying with us. Christopher, there is, as Father Beck is pointing out, looking at something that Pope Leo XIV had said on homosexuality over a decade ago, but a dozen years ago, there is a lot that we do not know about where he stands on issues that matter to many Catholics around the world.
That's right. And, in some ways he's a slightly unknown quantity. He's not been scrutinized in the way that other very high-profile church leaders might have been. Now, obviously, to have got the support of 89 cardinals in...
At least 89, right?
Sorry, at least 89, yeah. To have got that two-thirds majority.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have needed to have appealed to a kind of cross-section of people. Cardinals who perhaps are more conservative will have needed to have, I think, got behind him. At least some of them will have done. So we obviously need to look carefully at what's being said, what he said in the past. I do know, though, that Pope Francis respected him and thought of him very highly. He, first of all, appointed him a member of the dicastery for bishops, which chooses bishops, and then a few years later made him the prefect. So clearly Pope Francis saw in him something. He saw him as a capable leader, and he has this role. He has had this role leading that Vatican office for bishops. That gives him a lot of insight into the church globally. So he's been involved with appointing bishops. He's been involved in deciding who the church leaders should be across the world. Got a lot of information about the church that will stand him in good stead as Pope for carrying out reforms and for leading.
Father Beck mentioned what he was wearing, that when he came out, he chose to wear more traditional,
that red cape that's called a mozzetta.
Right, as different than Pope Francis had chosen to do. When you look at how he appeared, what do you see, Father Sawyer?
So I think I see two things in that. First, it's a return back to tradition. This is how popes have normally appeared at this moment for as long as we've had the visual record and the media of it. But I think the other thing that he's saying is that he's not going to try to clone Pope Francis's pastoral style. So the warm way he spoke, the way he approached people and greeted us before he gave his blessing, I think that certainly echoes back to Francis. But he's not going to try to exactly copy Francis, which I think is a very good thing.
The big question will be where he will decide to live.
Yes.
Is he going to live in Santa Marta, or is he going to go back to the Apostolic Palace? We'll have to watch
Well, Pope
that.
Francis had, of course, eschewed the...
That's right. Pope Francis had decided not to live in the palace, but to live in Santa Marta. Will Pope Leo XIV do the same? That's quite a big decision. Sorry.
So what happens now? I mean, he's supposed to have dinner with the cardinals.
That's right. And
they get their phones back. They see the response to this.
Yes.
And then at some point, presumably, he goes to bed alone. I mean, he has to be with his thoughts and his... But where? Where does he sleep tonight as the new pope?
He has to make that decision pretty soon. I mean, they're going to have a dinner. That dinner, I imagine, will be in Santa Marta. And then he will have to make that first decision, where am I going to live? And he's the Pope. He can pretty much decide, within reason.
Well, he can't go home.
He can't go home.
This is now home for him.
He can't leave the Vatican, but he can, he has a bit of flexibility, but I don't know. What do you think?
I wonder, actually, if it's possible he might end up back in the room he was in Santa Marta if they don't have time to turn everything over between now and then.
Exactly. For tonight, and then maybe he may make a decision in a few days' time. He's not someone who will make a rash decision. He's going to think about it. So I imagine it will be Santa Marta tonight, and then as time goes on, he might...
You keep emphasizing the word thoughtful, and I will say, just watching him, as we all did, he did exude that.
Yes.
That there was a deliberateness in a thoughtful way with what he had chosen to say, that he had taken his time clearly to write it and to prepare something to say. That's why it took more than an hour.
Exactly. He had put a lot of thought into that speech, and he'd written it out. He listed who he wanted to mention, the people, the Diocese of Rome, the diocese in Peru, which he led, reference to his membership of the Augustinian order, all those things. So he was being very deliberate in this first speech that he gave on the balcony of St. Peter's.
And for those just joining us at this historic moment, Father Sawyer, the first American Pope, history has been made today at the Vatican in Rome, in the Sistine Chapel, and we now have Pope Leo XIV. So Cardinal Provost of Chicago is now the first American Pope. In the blessing, in the address, as he addressed, and we don't have the formal numbers, I would say, Christopher, well north of 50,000 people, whatever capacity is of this St. Peter's Square it was at. I would think that was, what did you hear in these remarks that he clearly wrote in the hour between his election and his appearance?
One thing I certainly heard was the appeal for peace and the message of peace. So at a time when the world seems to be on fire in so many places, when we seem to be heading away from peace in so many international situations. The last message the College of Cardinals sent to the world before they went into conclave was this appeal for peace, and then here's this, the Pope from the United States, the Pope from the world superpower, coming out and speaking for peace in his first address to the world. I think that's a really powerful symbol.
Well, they would have gone into this, even in the brief sequestration that they had. Pakistan and India were shooting each other's planes out of the sky.
Yeah.
There was attacks, right? That situation is perilous.
Yes.
All of that changing in just the hours that they were sequestered.
Absolutely, and it was clear that the cardinals wanted a pope who would be able to speak into these situations, who was going to be a voice for peace. And of course, On Sunday, Pope Leo XIV will be giving his first Angelus address and prayer, where he will probably reflect on things that are going on in the world. So he'll have an opportunity on Sunday to speak about these crises. And I think the cardinals were very clear that they wanted a pope who has credibility as a moral voice on the world stage.
So, Father Sir, how quickly does everything settle and change here? We're now in this moment, this seismic change in history. And then tomorrow the world wakes up, there is a new pope. So then what happens?
So, one of the things that will need to happen, technically all the various officials of the Vatican, all the heads of the dicasteries and departments, almost all of them lost their office with the death of Francis formally. So
yes.
They'll need to be reappointed. Many will be reappointed to the same offices that they're in, but effectively he has to set up his curia, his administration, and figure out those appointments. So that's certainly one thing that'll be happening. Another major thing that I know I'll be looking for, Pope Francis was scheduled to make a trip to Nicaea to celebrate the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, a major ecumenical moment, and I'm hoping that Pope Leo will keep that trip, and so he'll be making a first international trip pretty quickly, actually, if he keeps that appointment.
Yeah, and I imagine he'll probably want to look pretty seriously about doing that trip.
Well, he's relatively young.
Relatively young, he's in his late 60s, and so, it could be a papacy that goes on for several years.
Yes, you could be looking at decades.
Yes.
Which is different than we have seen for the prior two popes.
Yes, and the last two popes, of course, Francis was 76 when he was elected, Benedict, I believe, was 78.
Yes.
They've gone for someone really a decade younger.
Yes.
Which is significant. They really do have immense confidence in this man.
Confidence and commitment at this incredible moment in history that has just been made here at the Vatican in Rome. Our coverage continues of the first American Pope, Pope Leo XIV, with Brianna Keeler and Boris Sanchez after a short break.
In fact, I've heard from folks who told us they've made anywhere from 10,000 to 300,000.